Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Bill Flanagan and I'm really pleased that you're able to join in today's town hall for what I think is a very important discussion about the future of the university. First, I want to thank Dave for his very generous comments. I've had an opportunity to work very closely with Dave over the last several weeks, really several months in the transition. He's been enormously generous with his time. I've greatly enjoyed the opportunity to meet all of the VPs, the deans, members of the board. I've attended GFC meetings. So although it's all been virtual, as indeed all of us are dealing with a virtual world right now, I do feel that I've had a chance to get to know many members of the university community. And I really look forward to an opportunity to meet more of you. And of course, an opportunity when life might be able to return more to normal and campus will once again be buzzing with life. Today, what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about some of my thoughts I'm calling U of A for tomorrow. And I am aware, of course, of the enormous financial challenges facing the university, coupled, of course, with the additional challenges of the COVID pandemic. But what I would like to propose is a proposal of systemic reform that I think can help the university not only address its current funding crisis, but can put the university in a stable position to continue to build and enhance its delivery on its mission and vision. What I'm proposing, however, will require profound change. First, in how the faculties are organized. And second, how we think about professional and administrative services on campus, both central and within faculties, and how we can structure these services to best support the academic mission. And third, the university needs to think very carefully about how it uses and develops its assets. I believe that we can turn our current challenge into a strategic transformation of the university that will position it to thrive and go forward. In 5 years, I believe we can be better placed to deliver on our vision and mission. We can make even greater contributions to the public good, sustain our position as one of the top 100 global universities, and most importantly, build even stronger levels of community engagement, driving economic growth, innovation, and creativity in Alberta and beyond. Now, this is the scope of the challenge. And of course, you're all very familiar with the nature of this challenge. In this year alone, the university is facing a $110 million cut to its budget. In years 2 and 3, an additional $53 million. We're assuming an additional new tuition revenue. As you know, our tuition fees will be increasing. But with the COVID pandemic, the extent to which we will realize this additional tuition revenue is in question. So we're really looking at a funding crisis of at least $127 million over the next 3 years. It's hard not to overstate the nature of the challenge facing us. Here's the urgency. We're looking at a government grant that will be cut by 33% over the next 3 years. The university has already announced over 1,000 staff reductions in the next 2 years. What we're really doing here is we're taking these 1,000 staff reductions, and we have not yet had a chance to rethink how we structure work on campus. And instead, what we're asking our staff to do is to do the same amount of work in the same way, but with 1,000 fewer staff members. And this is simply an unsustainable load for our remaining staff. And there are potentially highly negative impacts on teaching and research. There's a risk that the quality of the student experience will decline. There's a risk of a reduced ability to attract and retain top students and faculty, which of course could affect our rankings. We could be faced with a diminished university with a significantly reduced ability to contribute to economic growth and to the advancement of the public good in Alberta and beyond. Now, I want to assure you that I did not take this job to manage as best I can the decline of a great university. Instead, I think we do have an alternative. And this is the alternative that I would like to present, what I'm calling the University of Alberta for tomorrow, a vision for the next 2 years. First, I'm proposing that if we transform our organizational and academic structures, we could realize over $120 million in savings. And I'll talk a little bit more about the data that has gone into that estimate and why I think we can achieve that target. In 2 years, with a streamlined senior academic team of deans in place, we would be prepared to distinguish U of A as a global leader in innovation and entrepreneurship in higher education. With academic restructuring complete, we would be able to drive an unprecedented level of interdisciplinary teaching and research programs. And with more streamlined and efficient services, our staff would be even better equipped to help advance the university's core mission. And with rationalized and centralized services, we could provide enhanced and better coordinated level of services to our students, contributing to an improved student experience. And then once we had stabilized U of A's financial position, we would be in a position to, I believe, launch an ambitious program of new revenue generation, expanding existing programs and developing new ones that are highly responsive to student and employer demand. Now, this is a slide that I think, although we are in a challenging circumstance, I call this the slide, at least the sky is not falling. What we're looking at in the next 2 years, by 2022, 23, this is an estimate of where the University of Alberta will place vis-a-vis its peers in Canada in terms of its total grant and tuition revenue per student. And you'll see that we remain in a very competitive position, about the middle of the pack. I mean, previously, we were among the best funded universities in the country, and no question that will diminish over the next 2 years. But what is important is to note that we remain in a highly competitive position. And I believe that we will be well positioned to seize opportunities for growth. And this is, of course, one of many opportunities for growth, but I think one that's particularly impressive. We're looking at a 25% increase in the numbers of students graduating from grade 12 over the next 4 to 5 years in Alberta. These students will be knocking at the door of the University of Alberta to benefit in the education that we're able to offer our students. This is a wonderful opportunity for us, should we choose to decide to expand our enrollment, which would of course lead to a whole new stream of revenue that we could invest in our teaching and research programs. So here's some of my ideas for the University of Alberta 2025. And again, I'm only throwing out ideas here. None of this is set in stone. What I really want to do is inspire people to raise our eyes above the current challenge that we're facing and the opportunities that may be available to us in the next 5 years. I've already discussed one of those, and that is the positive demographic trend. And also, Alberta has one of the lowest participation rates in post-secondary education in the country. U of A could take the lead and expand our enrollment to over 50,000 students, increase the participation rate in Alberta, and we could also explore cutting-edge online programs, reaching students not only across Alberta, but around the world. With major new investments, from expanded enrollment and new revenue generation, U of A would be in a position to be a global leader in technology-enhanced teaching and learning, with a dramatically expanded range of work-integrated learning opportunities, highly responsive to student demand. Our research impact and community engagement would never have been better, advancing economic growth and the public good in Alberta and beyond. We could secure our rank among the top 100 global universities. We would have an unprecedented ability to attract and retain talented students and faculty from around the world. And with these new revenue streams, we could dramatically reduce our dependence on government grants from almost 60% of our operating revenue in 17-18 to less than 40% in 2024-25. But how are we going to get there? How on earth could we save $120 million by embarking on a program of academic and administrative restructuring? Well, the data that we've collected over the past year, and what I'm proposing today is really work that the university has been working on for well over the past year. Working with a group called Uniforum, a group out of Australia started by an academic. And this is a global benchmarking initiative, and it's designed to advance effectiveness and the efficiency of administrative services at universities. And what we have done with Uniforum is that we have done a deep dive into how we structure work on campus, what's called activity collection. trying to get a sense of how we structure this work and have we structured it in a way that is most efficient. And in particular, Uniforum provides us with benchmarking data so we can compare the performance of the University of Alberta to key peer institutions in Australia, the UK, and in Canada. Now, the Australian universities have started this process well over 10 years ago, and they have demonstrated enormous success in driving savings by initiating these programs of restructuring. The UK has also, about the last 5 years, a number of leading UK universities have likewise embarked on a similar program of restructuring. This is fairly new to Canada. A number of Canadian universities, as you see listed there, are engaged in the Uniforum initiative, but I think there's an opportunity for the University of Alberta to really lead the way in exploring the potential of these benchmarking initiative to drive strategic transformation at a Canadian university. So you'll see a number of Canadian members of the Uniforum group, and the data that we've collected were benchmarked against 52 peer institutions in Canada, UK, and Australia. So some very powerful data that tells us where we might be able to find efficiencies in how we operate the university. Now, we've been working with a consultancy group called the Nous Group. It's an international management consultancy group that has deep experience in higher education. Also, the Nous Group is very familiar with how to work with the Uniforum data that I mentioned. We're primarily interested in working with the Nous Group on this issue of organizational and system performance. And you'll see that the Nous Group is also operating in 10 locations around the world, 3 countries, and has had very significant experience working with a number of our international peers. You'll see these major universities in Australia, Monash, Sydney, and so forth, Queen Mary, University College. So we've got some very robust data that is supporting my claim that we could save up to $120 million with structural reform on campus. So we have a high level of organizational complexity on campus, and we know this from the data that we've collected. One interesting point is that similarly ranked universities, and here we are, the University of Alberta, the THE rankings, at about 140 in this particular ranking. And our research revenues of $500 million a year. We will see that there's a number of universities in the UK and Australia with significantly lower amount of research income, yet rank significantly higher than the University of Alberta. What the Nous Group tells us is this suggests that if we reduce our administrative complexity, take those savings and redirect them back into our core mission, there's a potential for the University of Alberta to improve its rankings. We have a research income that should be placing us within the top 50. Another organizational complexity that constrains the university is the number of our faculty members who are involved in administration. 292 faculty members, 15% of our total faculty. We know from the Uniforum data that this is a much higher figure at U of A than peer institutions in particularly the UK and Australia. 25% of our small sections do not cover their direct costs, let alone the administrative costs. So some very high costs that again, this data has brought to light. So here are some of the systemic disadvantages. We have 18 faculties. Our peer institutions that have demonstrated these savings typically have faculties between 6 to 10. We have excessive levels of management. There's a fragmentation of efforts, and we're leaving opportunities for benefits of scale on the table. We have many small courses with very low enrollments, which are very costly. We're investing a great deal in these small courses, but we're investing less in the student cohort experience. We also have high administrative costs that are diverting funds from the university's mission. Our services generally have low expertise. That is, what we're doing is we're asking many of our staff members to do a whole variety of tasks, rather than focusing and developing expertise on a smaller number of tasks, which of course can drive efficiencies. Poor process design, highly manual processes, high spend from suboptimal procurement practices. We also have a very large physical footprint, which is an enormous cost to the university. So here are some of the drivers of the organizational cost at the University of Alberta. 50% of our staff are administration. That is, they're not faculty. They're not teaching staff. This is a significantly higher percentage than at our peer institutions in Australia and in the UK. 43% of our admin staff are generalists. That is, they're doing a whole variety of different tasks. They're not focusing and developing expertise. And this is leading to further inefficiencies. There's a high level of duplicated services, inefficient manual processes, and so forth. Also, the enormously high maintenance and infrastructure costs driven by a footprint that is 50% larger than the Canadian comparators. So again, some very powerful data here. Compared to UK and Australian peers, U of A spends above average on facilities management. Significant gains to be made with efficiencies found here. External engagement, recruiting students, for example, general administration, IT, finance, research administration, HR. We're significantly spending more above average than the UK and Australian peers. Now, interestingly, our position is very similar to the other Canadian universities participating in the Uniforum data. So this tells us that the Canadian universities are trailing the UK and Australian universities. But as I said earlier, there's an opportunity for the University of Alberta to really lead the way for other Canadian institutions to follow. And other drivers of organizational cost. The most efficient universities centralize their transactional activities, including things like payroll, procurement, expense reimbursement. But at the University of Alberta, we know from the data that we've collected that only 56% of administrative operating costs are in the VP portfolios. That is, are centralized. And so we can see enormous gains could be made by centralizing more transactional activity at the University of Alberta, particularly when it comes to teaching admin, research, general administration, external engagement, and finance, and student support. And the academic realignment will ultimately support our mission and impact. Larger faculties, we know, spend 50% less to deliver administrative operations. And again, the data tells us this. Reducing the numbers of faculties at the University of Alberta by 50% could save up to $26 million in operational admin costs and $18 million in released academic capability. That is, the academics who would be returned to full-time teaching and research and be relieved of academic or administrative responsibilities. If the remaining faculties had the same efficiency as the Faculty of Science at the University of Alberta currently has, we could save over $100 million. And fewer faculties and departments would enable lower per student costs through the reduced duplication of functions, specialization of roles, automation, and fewer, better supported academic leaders, freeing the capacity of other academic leaders to return full-time to teaching and research. Now, again, the Nous group has worked with a number of universities in Australia and the UK, and you see the time period where they have worked over the period of time and the savings that they have demonstrated to have achieved. So you'll see some very significant savings at major peer institutions in Australia and in the UK. What's important, however, to note is that our target for savings, if we look at the cuts we're facing in this 1 year, are significantly more than what these Australian and UK universities faced. And the time period in which we need to do this, 1 year, is significantly tighter than the time period at the other peer institutions. So the scale and speed at which we need to move is unprecedented. Now, here are the 4 work streams that we're proposing. First work stream would deal with administrative services. The savings could be in the range of $95 million. Now, this again will be looking at the administrative services both as central services and also services within each faculty and identifying opportunities for savings. There's enormous savings to be had with procurement, consolidation, space and facilities. This is reducing our footprint and the cost of our footprint. Again, substantial savings to be realized. And academic design is the numbers of faculties and departments that we have, examining that with a view to faculty rationalization. we could save up to $65 million, according to the data provided to us by Uniforum and NOS. So ongoing benefits reporting will be a top priority. We need to regularly evaluate what we're doing. We need to measure what we're doing and empower leaders to deliver on these work streams. And we need to actively deliver these benefit realizations. And we need to adjust as appropriate as we move along. And the savings beyond the government cut, that is, if we are able to achieve savings even in excess of the amount of the cut that the university is facing, all of those savings would be reinvested back into the university's core mission. So we will track the budget spend, the active roles, the procurement spend, the total space footprint. All of this will be tracked and reported on a regular basis. Now, this is the governance structure that we're proposing for the University of Alberta for tomorrow. First, setting up a Service Excellence Transformation Steering Committee. The membership and will be chaired by the VP of Finance and Administration. This is the committee that will be looking at the larger administrative restructuring program. And then second, the provost will be leading the Academic Restructuring Working Group. The composition of the working group is still being determined, but here are the members, or the targeted members of the working group. The Academic Restructuring Working Group and SET will both report to the senior administration of the university, which will then bring the proposal to APC, a GFC, for approval at the General Faculties Council, and likewise approval at the Board of Governors. So the Service Excellence Transformation Initiative will be focused on examining business support functions, whether done centrally or in faculties, with a view to the redesign of these services, focusing on achieving economies of scale and specialization. And we'll also focus on the redesign of procurement practices, including consolidation of suppliers and strategic procurement framework. The Academic Restructuring Working Group will develop recommendations for structural change to the academic units. And this could include proposals to create, merge, reprofile faculties. And the process of this academic restructuring will be first to establish underlying principles and objectives. Second, a consultation and data gathering, assessment and design of structures, approvals at GFC and board, implementation for the spring. Now, this process will, of course, necessarily involve a broad process of consultation within the university, community. And the time frame is also very aggressive. Administrative transformation, procurement, space and facilities will take a little bit longer because, of course, it's costly to reduce our space. And here's the proposal for academic design. The project scope has to be pan-university, high-end, high-paced, and end-to-end. The scope of the cost reduction is unprecedented in the history of the university. The history of the university has been highly decentralized, but the urgency of the challenge means that we need to take a university-wide coordinated approach. The university needs to work together. Everything needs to be on the table. Everyone must be involved. There needs to be an end-to-end transformation, and the implementation must be high-paced. GFC and the board will play a critical role, actively engaged in the academic restructuring process with early and ongoing consultations. I'm asking all members of the university community to be open to different ways of working and operating, and to advise us on communication strategies for internal and external stakeholders. Communication and transparency will be key to the success of this initiative. And finally, of course, GFC will be asked, and the board will be asked, to approve the proposed final design of the academic restructuring. So immediate next steps are to set up the governance office, the SET program office, the academic restructuring working group, plan and launch university-wide communications, and scope the streams. And finally, in closing, I just want to say we also must be mindful of our commitments to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and truth and reconciliation in this transformation initiative. And for me, that means that we need to really keep our mind focused on an inclusive process of consultation, an inclusive process that includes all members of the university community. And likewise, we need to reflect on what the final academic leadership group will look like. This leadership group needs to reflect our ongoing commitment to EDI and truth and reconciliation. So thank you for listening. And now we will turn to questions. And I look forward to working with all of you as we work on the University of Alberta for tomorrow.